Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the August 28th, 2018 meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Also, there was an executive session of the board held on August 28, 2018, prior to this meeting at the high school for the following purposes: discussion of a settlement agreement for student 530480478, discussion of a waiver agreement for student 230248, and for student 145-414-1336, as well as discussion to consider the acquisition of real property located in Worcester Township, discussion on potential lease of the Audubon Elementary School property, and discussion on tax appeal litigation matter before Montgomery County Court with SWD 101 LLC and WNR 38 LLC and the Board of Assessment Appeals of Montgomery County. By way of attendance, we have all board members here, 8 physically, 1 virtually. Mr. Navarrete is on the computer over there. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
There are no guest or scheduled speakers this evening, so we'll move on to reports.
All right. So under reports, first up we have the Finance Committee and Mr. Earnshaw.
Thank you. The Finance Committee met on August 8th. The meeting was called to order at 6:30 p.m. All committee members were in attendance. First item on the agenda was the monthly financial reports. Mr. Bricker presented a list of bills, treasurer's report, and the expenditure and revenue reports. He provided responses to questions from the committee at the meeting and via email prior to the meeting. He also provided information on the bank accounts that were closed this month as shown on the treasurer's report, and there were no budgetary transfers this month. The list of bills in the treasurer's report are on the agenda for approval at tonight's meeting. Mr. Bricker also reported that the May and June healthcare consortium reports are not yet available and are expected to be available for the September meeting of the committee. While there were no additional discussion topics, there were a few other matters discussed. I had asked for an update on the notice to Lower Providence taxpayers regarding the correction of due dates. I also asked for an update on the 2017 year-end close and audit, and Mr. Bricker provided updates to both of those. And Ms. Cancro inquired about mental health programs and funding, review of costs relating to activities and clubs, and elementary school teacher needs, and Dr. Zerbe responded to each of those matters. On courtesy of the floor, Joe Bickelman from Lower Providence commented on or asked questions regarding the list of bills, elimination of the field replacement account, detailed transactions regarding activity, athletic, and club accounts, the effective date of an employee's resignation, the recently awarded waste disposal contract, and the salary for the coordinator of technology. John Andrews, also from Lower Providence, commented on and or asked questions regarding the list of bills. And Jim Mollick Worcester commented on and or asked questions regarding the recently awarded waste disposal contract, the Shenandoah property tax appeal, enrollment and birth rate declines, cost savings and benefits from closing Arrowhead Elementary, discussion at a recent Education Committee meeting regarding the timeline for evaluating Audubon Elementary, and the principal's input on the school closing process. He also provided handouts to the committee regarding Arrowhead Elementary, enrollment, and birth rates. And the meeting adjourned at 7:31 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Property and Transportation Committee, Mr. Navarrete.
Yeah, the Property and Transportation Committee met August 13th, called order at 6:30 p.m. In attendance were Mr. Navarrete, Mr. Earnshaw, Mrs. Hull, Mrs. Reese, Dr. Zerbe, Mr. Fretz. Our guests that evening were Mr. Sakala, Mr. Miller from Fadavia, and Mr. John Kowalski from AEM, who are the architects for the Arcola project. Mr. Sakala presented a to-date summary of summer project expenses and a slightly revised timeline that had been updated to reflect the September approval of projects for the 2019 summer. Under the current capital projects, Mr. Kowalski notified the committee of a 2-week delay in delivery of the air handlers that may impact the critical path ceiling work. Until delivery occurred, it was whether or not the delay would impact the substantial completion date of November 30th. Mr. Navarrete also requested that the committee be provided with regularly updated Gantt charts of the project schedules for upcoming projects. Under change orders for the Arcola project, Mr. Kowalski detailed 4 change orders that had already been discussed. They covered work for the wheelchair lift concrete work, brick patchwork, I am struggling tonight. Brick patchwork near the wall clock, interior brick cleaning, and covering exposed ceiling structures. Mr. Scala also provided the committee with an update on how much of the respective allowances had been used by each contractor. At the high school, Mr. Scala informed the committee that the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing work had hit the substantial completion mark as planned, and all fire alarm and electrical work had been inspected and approved. The geotesting that the board approved in July was slated to take place as of last week. Also discussed, which we discussed at the special meeting and work session last week, was the deficiencies found in the high school roof that are being addressed. At Eagleville, Mr. Fretz informed the committee about the work underway to replace the window gaskets that has since been completed, and also informed them about the drain work that was underway. Under transportation, Dr. Zerbe reviewed the root causes of transportation issues from last year. The remediation options have been put in place this year to prevent a reoccurrence, and the committee members asked several questions regarding bell time adjustments, new developments, and the timing of communication with parents. At Arrowhead, Dr. Zerbe updated the committee on the findings of mold in 2 of the 4 Arrowhead modular classrooms and the different remediation options that were evaluated. Remediation was expected to cost $80,000, and work would be completed within 8 to 10 days of the committee meeting date. That work has since been completed. Under property determination process, Dr. Zerbe presented the committee with a proposed decision-making timeline for the Arrowhead property, which will be discussed tonight. Dr. Zerbe also presented the committee with a draft plan for signage at the athletic fields at the high school that included proposed commercial terms that spanned multiple price points. In order to help sales be as quick and successful as possible, Dr. Zerbe recommended that athletic teams be awarded a portion of the final sale. During courtesy of the floor, as has been done in previous meetings, comments were accepted at 3 different times during the meeting. The first for direct questions for John Kowalski of AEM. Second for direct questions for Dan Sakala of Fidavia, regarding the high school projects, and then again at the conclusion of the meeting. There were quite a few folks there at the meeting, so I won't run through their individual comments, but those are all in the minutes for you to read. The meeting was adjourned at 9:05.
Thank you, Mr. Navarrete. Education Committee, Ms. Reese.
We met on August 6th at 6:30. In attendance was myself, Ms. Cancro, Ms. Drummond, Mr. Winters, Dr. Katona, Dr. Engstad, and Dr. Spiewak. First on the agenda was the opening professional development days, which occurred today and yesterday. There were 2 days this year. The entire district did not get together. That will happen in October. Dr. Zerbe went and met instead with the entire staff throughout the day, and breakfast was at each building. The 2 days mainly focused on faculty meetings, safety discussions, department meetings, and room preparation. Next was mental health update. An intensive where Dr. Engstad and a team of people are looking at the intensive program at Arcola. There's as I said, a team involved in planning and implementing a similar program as to Upper Merion. They've narrowed down two agencies. They chose the same as Upper Merion has used for the last 4 years. There will be 20 students maximum to participate, and they hope to implement in November or January. Cost is approximately $165,000 the first year, with a 2.75 increase the second, which is just under $170,000. Cost can be prorated the first year. A 2-year commitment is needed. This would include 2 clinicians, a director, professional development, access to evaluations, overflow testing, counseling, etc. The committee suggested moving to finance and full board in the future. Immunization update. Letters were sent to parents at the time in the beginning of August. 175 were due in the high school, 85 at Arcola. The next letter was going to be sent mid-month. Calls started last week. A clinic was not able to be offered this year because the provider is unavailable, basically because of so many of these immunizations being needed. The provider is unable
to keep up with demand. There is a staff flu clinic on November 6th. Dr. Spiewak gave a sports and activities update. Football had started a week early due to heat-mandated training. All other high school sports started their preseason on August 13th. Arcola sports start on the first or second week of school, depending on the sport. Teams are working around construction at the high school. Dr. Spiewak also reviewed new PIAA rules about students moving districts and ineligibility, training requirements for coaches, and vacancies. All coaches receive Methactin email and are to use Remind-type apps instead of texting. Impact concussion testing occurring over the summer for student athletes who are required to participate every 2 years. Homecoming is set for October 19th with the dance on October 20th. We also reviewed dates and times for back-to-school nights and orientations. I will not repeat them all, but everything can be found on the website. We did review the reports, the enrollment report, and also have a discussion of class size. There were 3 comments from the public. Megan Fitzgerald asked about Woodland Kindergarten and the English language program, as well as confirming that 4th grade would be adding a class. She reiterated the importance of preschool as well as full-day kindergarten. Jennifer Doherty asked about the busing policy if kindergarten class at capacity, and let us know there's a Simons Fund event at PJP on September 30th. Jim Mullet gave committee members birth rate and Arrowhead information. He repeated his suggestion of closing Arrowhead. He also expressed that he is not in favor of all-day kindergarten. We adjourned at 8:03 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Policy Committee, Ms. Hull, I understand there was no meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did not meet in August. I do not have a report to give.
Thank you. The Intermediate Unit, Mr. Ryan?
Thank you. The Montgomery County Intermediate Unit did meet. They met on August 22nd. This is actually one of the few occasions where we will meet before our board meeting, so my information is actually very timely. Generally, it falls on the day after our board meeting. Some of the items discussed that night there were 5 initial budgets that were presented and passed. There were a lot of personnel matters. They've recently undergone a reorganization at the IU, so there is a new director on their staff, as well as close to 45 new staff. I think it was about 25 new hires and about 11 status changes that they've seen since they've done the reorganization. So there is quite a lot of employment and HR-related items, about 5 or 6 pages, so I won't go through all of them. There was some talk, I'll mention some things related to Methactin. They authorized a sub-grant agreement for IDEA funds. We were one of the 10 school districts who were included in that. There was also some contract agreement with Montgomery County Intermediate Unit and Methactin for professional development, a contract agreement for the IU and Methactin for mathematics professional development, and that's pretty much all that had to do with Methactin. In terms of the legislative report, it's a little bit thinner this month because the state House of Representatives and Senate are both on break currently, so there's not a whole lot new to report there. There was 2 things that were mentioned in regards to School Safety and Security Act, Act 44, 2018. They did make sure that we appointed a school administrator for School Safety and Security Coordinator. That had to be done no later than August 31st, 2018. You will actually see that on tonight's agenda. And then there was also mention of the new school director training. Starting with next year's election, all new school directors will be required to complete at least 4 hours of training. Beyond that, I believe if you are a current board member who is re-elected, you will be required to complete about 2 hours. Both the IU currently offers and PSBA offers services. They would need to get that approved by the state to count as the educational hours required under that Act 55. And on the federal side, there is some talk now that about the IDEA. I've passed along some information to both Dr. Katona and Dr. Angstedt in terms of the federal government's really going to start looking at that program and to see if there's any impacts that the district would like to see, worked on or changed, or any new information along those lines. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. North Montco Technical Career Center, Ms. Drummond and Ms. Reese.
We met on August 20th. Very important meeting, but somewhat brief. They had a lot of new hires, like many schools do over the summer, and there was a new teacher training going on at the time. We had mentioned that some of the students had gone to the national competition in June. There were 11 that made it all the way to the nationals. There was not a winner this year, which is a little disappointing, but it's pretty impressive to have 11 students go. And speaking of students, the enrollment as of August 20th was 1,144, which was the highest number at the Tech Center in 4 years. However, they did mention that does usually decrease a little bit in September. So I will update you. Liz and I will update you in September, but things were going on well. I also, in the month of August, got to participate in their audit, which was a new one for me. And informally, the audit all looks good, so I should have that for you by September or October. I think October is when they'll have the official audit finished. But,
Thank you, Ms. Reese. I guess next month we can look forward to hearing a report from our student board representatives again. And next would be the Methacton Education Foundation. We have Ms. Krelovich here, the executive director.
Hi, how are you guys? Thank you very much. Mr. Beam is in court today, so he was not able to be here tonight. We've been very busy at the foundation, though. We had our board retreat last week where we focused on the future of foundation funding. On Saturday, we had a beautiful morning for the We Run Out Hunger 5K, where we raised even more money than we did last year. We still have donations coming in, so we don't have a total yet. Yesterday, we joined Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Regina at all of the faculty and staff meetings around the district, where Dr. Zerbe was kind enough to introduce both the foundation and myself to all of our employees in the district. We teamed up with an awesome group of faculty and staff ambassadors who are going to be cheerleaders for the foundations inside each of the buildings. Those folks, in case you see them when you're in the school, are going above and beyond to help us out and spread the word. Brian Michaels, Stephanie Sawyer, Adam Chantry, Wendy McKenzie, Scott Engel, Pam Craig, Kim Beam, Linda Bradley, Jenny Geis, and Brad Dale are all helping us as ambassadors this year. Excuse me. All of the principals have been kind enough to either provide us time at back to school night to speak, to show our video introducing the foundation, or in the schools that don't have the format that would accommodate that, they'll be including our video in their electronic newsletters that they send out for back to school. We have our 6 instruments that were funded by the foundation arrived in Skyview, and Mrs. Bugash has them all ready to loan out to students in need who are excited to play this year. And today we picked up backpacks from the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Montgomery County, who, along with the North Penn Education Foundation, collected school supplies for students in need in both North Penn and in Methacton, and we were able to deliver those to Dr. Reddish and Jennifer Johnson at Eagleville today. So it's been a busy month. We'll see you guys next month. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Krelovich. And just to piggyback on the end there, having been there on Saturday for the 5K, I think one of the greatest things that I noticed, besides the sense of community and all the fun that everyone was having, was Dan Sakala from Fidavia was there. Fidavia was one of the big sponsors for the event. Dan came down and was handing out water to the runners and volunteers that were there, which I thought was just a great thing that he did. So it was a good day. I think everyone had a great time.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yep, thank you. Communications, Ms. Lynch.
Okay, so these few days are busy ones for communication. We're sending out a lot of reminders to families and updates, working with principals to refine their back-to-school communications and sending regular reminders at the district level. with updates that are designed to help families get ready for school, including school lunch information, Power School reminders, transportation reminders, and back-to-school night notices. All the back-to-school nights will take place during the first 2 weeks of September, and more information. We look forward to the first day of school. Tomorrow we'll publish our annual Welcome Back video. We have encouraged families to share their back-to-school photos with us so they can be incorporated into this celebration of the new school year. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. Superintendent's report, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the first day of school tomorrow. I'll be out along with other central office administrators, joining our principals and other staff, greeting students and welcoming them back to school. In addition, a message to families will go out for opening day, not only to staff, but also to our families about being champions for all of our students and the power of we, which is our theme for the 2018-19 school year. We believe that all of us together provide the education for the students in Methacton, not only our staff, but our families as well. We'll also be rolling out information regarding ESSA and Future Ready Index. We've been working with our principals over the summer, as well as now rolling out that information in a newsletter, not only to our staff but also to our parents. So we'll expect that information coming out in the coming weeks. And last on the good news messages is that I want to thank our custodians, our secretaries, our maintenance staff, our administrators, our technology staff, everyone that participated this summer in getting our buildings ready. And I also want to thank our two largest third-party contractors, the staff of First Student, as well as the staff of Aramark, for their work over the summer and preparing for the return of our students. Lastly, I want to just make notice for the board and the public that listed under new business, there is an additional agenda item, and I'm going to read it. The item will be to approve waiver agreements for student 230248 and student 1454141336, and a settlement agreement for student 53048048. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Do we want to read the advisements at that point, or do you want to just...
The advisements are listed. Most of them are personnel changes. There is one advisement about a trip. If you remember, under Policy 121, there was a trip that required, that would normally be approved by the board, but because it fell between board meetings, I authorized a trip after taking the proper information precautions.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. At this time, we'll take public comment on board action items this evening. Okay. Dr. Malik?
Jim Malik, Worcester. Sweet Stevens, where's our solicitor tonight? I don't see him up here. Where, Eric Fry, Bartle, where is he tonight?
He's not here, you're correct.
Is he sick?
I can't speak to Mr. Fry, I just know that he is not here.
Where did he go? Is he in a hospital? Or is he pulling a board member routine? Well, I guess I can find out from the superintendent. I sent you guys by email a copy of Civil Suit 08-06863 consisting of 20 counts alleging violations of the Sunshine Law, alleging improper announcement of executive sessions to talking about a board retreat. The person you're going to hire tonight, because I'll bet you $1,000 you're going to hire him tonight, was involved in that suit. Attached was a letter from Attorney Reba from Sweet Stevens supporting my reliance on case law and instructions to the board secretary to change the board's practice to what I suggested, culminating in a settlement agreement and amending Board Policy 006 to put everything that I said you should have been doing into your board policy. Now, if you ever wonder why I'm so knowledgeable about the Sunshine Law, it's because of this. This is a course that I attended given by Frank Bartle and Eric Fry, who are authorities on the Sunshine Law, unlike the people you're going to hire tonight. That's how come I know so much about the Sunshine Law, because the people you're going to let go are authorities on the Sunshine Law. And I attended their course. That's how come I know so much about the Sunshine Law. Sweet Stevens, the guys that you're going to hire tonight, to the best of my recollection, were the solicitors at the time of hiring former Superintendent Tim Quinn. I don't know whether you guys remember Tim Quinn, but we hired him after the ensuing media fiasco. We had to get rid of Tim Quinn. All I had to do was a little bit of Google search, and I knew exactly about his background. I could have given the board at the time the advice that they needed. Now, I saved the best for last, and that's why I handed you that piece of paper. The people you're going to hire tonight, Sweet Stevens, were the solicitor during the PlanCon process for the Skyview disaster. According to PDE, roughly 1 out of 1,000 projects get voided. I filed an extensive complaint to not build that school. In that letter I gave you to Superintendent Miller, the projects were voided because of my complaint. And people you're going to hire tonight were the solicitor during the entire PlanCon process. All that data pointed to not building that school. Now, the people you're going to get rid of, Frank Bartle, and this is public knowledge, got you lights for your school here. Your other solicitor couldn't even do it. They saved you between $400,000 to $800,000 with the appeal, fencing, berms, etc. Their assessment advice made you $3.2 million on your taxes annually. And you're going to get rid of them. You guys are ridiculous. So, my recollection is the reason that Sweet Stevens was terminated here was not because there was any personal relationship with Frank Bartle. It's because of all the issues that I just told you about. There's no personal relationship issue. There was some reasons that Sweet Stevens was here for a long time.
Dr. Malik, can you please wrap up?
Sure. So all the issues I just talked about, I think, were the reason that the prior board made the move to Frank Bartle. Not because there's a personal relationship. Frank Bartle's firm is one of the best firms in Montgomery County. And you guys are going to make the mistake, and I'll say it again, you're going to make the mistake of getting rid of the best firm in Montgomery County. But go ahead, it's good for me. I'd rather go against these guys than Frank Bartle. The only thing that's been protecting you from me doing anything legal is Frank Bartle's firm. So, all right, thank you.
Any other public comment on board action items? Moving on. May I have a motion to approve the work session meeting minutes for the meeting held on July 17th, 2018, and the board meeting minutes held on July 24th, 2018 as attached? First, Ms. Reese, and a second. Ms. Drummond, any comments from the board? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes. We'll start down here. Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. May I have a motion to approve the law firm of Sweet Stevens, Katz & Williams LLP of Hershey, Pennsylvania to provide solicitor services for the Methacton School District in accordance with the attached fee schedule? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond, comments from the board? Mr. Earnshaw.
First, my apologies for not being able to attend the meeting last week where this matter was on the agenda to be discussed. I did watch the video from the meeting, and I was hoping to hear some information about the RFP process, how the responses were reviewed, how I did hear some information about the RFP process, but not as much detail as I would have liked about who the RFP went to, did we look outside Montgomery County, and so forth. I did send an email trying to get some information about the process, and have not received a response to date. I don't particularly have information suggesting one firm is better than the other, but I do have concerns. I'd like to hear more about how we went about doing the RFP, who reviewed it, did we do any scoring of the firm's responses by any of the board members, and what I'm referring to is what we went through in the process of selecting a new auditor that Mr. Brecker led. So in that regard, since I've not received much information, I'd like to make a motion to table item 9, solicitor services relating to the approval of the law firm of Sweet Stevens as the district solicitor. Thank you.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Yes, there is a second.
Okay. So at this point, we take a vote on the motion of whether or not to table it. So we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
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 Yes.
Okay, so 6-3, the motion to table does not pass. Are there any other comments from the board?
On the
We're
motion.
still on the original motion now of approving the firm.
I had one question that I had forgotten to ask last week, and that was just, I was worried about if there was any schedule conflicts with this firm also handling North Penn, and that was answered that there are contingency plans in place in case, different solicitors that can help in case both districts are needing a solicitor on the same evening. So I was happy to hear that.
Okay, regarding the RFP process and what was done with the information that was received, when we initially received the responses to the RFP, I did share that information out with a couple of board members to get input on a small scale, so obviously not discussing it with the whole board. Knowing the firms that we received the responses from, I opted not to interview the firms because I'm familiar with all of them. And that's essentially, that's a part of the process. And then obviously bringing it to the work session last week was the rest of the process so that the full board could discuss it. Documents were sent out to the board last week, which I know was not very timely for the work session, for our discussion that evening. So, did you have something to say, Ralph?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, I guess I'll repeat my comments from last week that I think from a process standpoint, in dealing with a professional service where we're not talking about somebody that supplies us paper or copiers, I do think we owe it to Eric, to Bartle, to sit and have a conversation with them about where we perceive shortfalls to be. It's a professional courtesy, and I'm disappointed that it didn't happen either from the president, the superintendent, or a meeting of members of the board. Instead, it happened through individual phone calls with Eric that he initiated over the weekend. That being said, my objection to moving forward isn't about that process. I asked for information last week for a full financial analysis of the offers, because even though if we were to compare Bartle directly with Sweet Stevens, there's a strict hourly rate there. We can see that they're nearly identical. However, both Rudolph Clark and Fox Rothschild, their estimates contain retainers, and depending on the percentage of hours that were billed that fall within that retainer, there's a potential for significant savings for the district, and I don't think we'd be doing our fiduciary responsibility if we didn't investigate that. If that percentage of hours was significant, our quote normal billing of $100,000 a year might save $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000. If the percentage is comparable and there's no significant financial savings to the district by switching, then I would be comfortable voting on this tonight. But because I have incomplete information, I'll be abstaining from the vote tonight.
Understood. I think another thing that we have to factor into our cost analysis is the level of expertise in the firm and the solicitor that we would be getting. One thing that I have noticed in my experience as a board member is the amount of time that it takes to get a response from a solicitor can vary greatly depending on the solicitor's level of expertise and comfort with the subject matter. It's one of the reasons that I made the recommendation to switch to Sweet Stevens and to bring Kyle Summers back on board. His level of expertise when it comes to education law has been unparalleled in anyone else that I've interacted with in this capacity. So while maybe another firm might have ultimately a different hourly rate, if it takes that other firm twice as long to do the work, then to me, we're not going to realize any cost savings. So while I understand that needs to be part of the conversation, I don't know that that's enough for me personally to hang my hat on. I know there was also questions about whether or not we could go outside of the county. It's my understanding that firms tend to stay pretty local for this sort of thing. So while we could look at other firms outside of the county, we'd be bringing, travel expenses and things like that into the equation as well. I know there was information that was presented by the public tonight as well that I think, to me, it's not relevant to this process. We're talking about events that transpired over 10 years ago, attorneys who are no longer with the firms that we're talking about. And while there are some things that I believe that Dishel, Bartle, and Dooley have done for us over the years, I can only base my recommendation and my vote on what my experience has been in the 2.5 years that I've been on the board. And yes, I could have had a conversation with Eric Fry prior to making this motion or making this suggestion, I should say. I feel that my confidence level in the advice that we were getting from our solicitor had diminished significantly. And for that reason, I opted not to have the conversation.
So my comment is this. I understand your concerns, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But however, I do believe in the process. I do believe being a new member, do not know the history of the past 10 years, nor am I as interested, but what I would have liked is an interview process. Been able to create the RFP process if it was going outside the county or staying within the 4 that we chose, and then being able to have a group of board members interview each candidate from those law firms. I think that would make me feel more comfortable. I could be able to discuss their background and, have a more of a comfort level rather than strong opinions of people on the board. That's my only concern. I don't have that confidence of seeing them before our board, so.
I understand. I think that's part of the difficulty in trying to do these things as transparently as possible. I did present the information that I had to a couple of board members, and that was not a suggestion that was born out of that process. So in hindsight, maybe it would have been another direction we could have gone. But ultimately, we're here with the vote before us tonight. Are there other comments from the board? I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this discussion at all. Did you have something, Ms. Hull?
I just want to say, from a policy standpoint, I would support a change in the law firm. I do know from years of being in the audience at policy and now being on the committee that I do think Kyle Summers has an expertise in Pennsylvania Code, in Sunshine Act, and I have faith that this would be a good move for our district.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, I'm not opposed to hiring Sweet Stevens and getting Kyle back on board. I had, individual dealings with Kyle as I came on board, potential conflicts of interest because my wife's a teacher. I hold him in the highest regard. My experiences with him were nothing but professional, and that's why I'm going to abstain and not vote no, because my objection here is more to the process and the incomplete information than it is to the actual hiring of Sweet Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Navarrete. Are there any other comments or questions from the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start down at this end. Mr. Navarrete?
I abstain.
Okay. Mr. Winters?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
No.
I abstain.
Okay, so with a vote of 6 yeses, 1 no, and 2 abstentions, the motion carries. Mr. Summers, you can join us at the table now. That would be appreciated. Thank you. Moving on to fiscal items, we have our list of bills. Mr. Bricker?
Tonight for your approval, we have the list of bills, the treasurer.
I'm sorry, wait one second. Mr. Winters?
Just for previous understanding, I think the reason for abstention needs to be stated by the board member.
I don't believe that it does.
I can jump in. First of all, I'd just like to thank the board on behalf of our firm for the appointment. The duty to provide an explanation for an abstention is listed in the Pennsylvania Ethics Act. So if there is an abstention made due to a potential conflict of interest, there is an obligation to explain an abstention. The law is silent as to whether there needs to be an explanation for an abstention for some reason other than a conflict of interest under the Ethics Act.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Fiscal items, Mr. Bricker?
Tonight for your approval, we have the list of bills, the treasurer report, and there are no budgetary transfers as they cannot occur until October.
Mr. Bricker, if you would, so kind, if you could just give us an update on transportation?
Sure. So the call center has been active, taking in phone calls and logging them and answering the voicemails. We've been routing the students, making changes to the routes and going through them. With the router and first student, we've answered or at least have made decisions on over 250 phone calls that have come in, and all but a very couple parents have been called back, mainly because we could not contact them or we're waiting for additional information. Tomorrow morning we'll be staffing the call center as we start the school year.
Fingers crossed for you that all goes well. I have full faith. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills in the treasurer's report as presented? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Earnshaw, are there any comments from the board? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Navarrete?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. Personnel items, Mr. Regina.
Thank you. We have a number of items for the board's consideration this evening. Under resignations for professional, we have 1 item. Classified resignations, we have 3 items. For establishment of additional class, under C, we have 2 items. For professional employment, we have 9 items. For classified employment, we have 11 items. For change of status for classified staff, we have 2 items. For professional and compensated leave, we have 1 item. For classified uncompensated leave, we have 3 items. For sabbatical leave, we have 1 item. Bless you. For supplemental contracts, we have 10 items. For salary adjustments, we have 1 item. For our classified substitute list, we have 2 items. Under volunteers, we have 1 item, and we have 1 item for community education.
Thank you, Mr. Regina. We're going to just take the first 2 items under personnel first. So may I have a motion to approve the resignations, both professional and classified, as presented here this evening? Mr. Winters, can I have a second? Mr. Ryan, any comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote, starting down at this end now. Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Next, may I have a motion to approve the establishment of an additional 2nd and 4th grade class at Woodland Elementary School as presented? Mr. Winters, can I have a second? Ms. Cancro, any comments from the board? Mr. Ryan?
Do you have any update for us from last week? Thank you, Ms. Regina.
The enrollment reports that you're receiving, and I believe you've all seen this afternoon, but this is just a similar copy to what you have. The 2 pages after, you'll notice, is the grade 2 and the grade 4 update report, similar to what we saw last week, but this is with our updated numbers as of 2 o'clock this afternoon.
What's the total number of students we have in K-4 who are being rerouted to other schools currently?
At the present time, I believe there's 3 students that we have rerouted, and all 3 of those are at the kindergarten level. We do have 2 students tomorrow that'll be coming in at 4th grade at Eagleville that may also require rerouting. But that's it on the schedule that we discussed today at 2 o'clock. We'll know that for sure after the parents come in and meet with us.
So they're fully aware of the possibility? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment that I sort of think this was a good process, that we added this as a potential to the budget as a provisional as we see class sizes in the spring and what we anticipate would be required, and having the administration have the flexibility to do the right thing if it needs to be done or not, if depending on the class size. So I think this was a good way of getting in front of a potential late summer discussion. So just some feedback.
I also appreciate the amount of information that was provided and the frequency of the updates. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so lost my place here. We have our motion to approve the establishment of the additional 2nd and 4th grade class. We have a motion with the second. So all those in favor, we're going to start with the roll call down here with Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Does any board member want to take any of the remaining items D through P separately?
Yeah, could we take separately D, E, and L? Just mainly because I have questions on each one of those items.
All right, so we'll start with, may I have a motion to approve the employment professionals as listed here on the agenda this evening? Mr. Winters, and a second. Ms. Reese, and comments from the board. Mr. Earnshaw?
Yeah, just a question. I think this was covered at the work session, but I just want to clarify that a lot of these positions have TBD as far as the effective date. And is that because they're coming from other schools and they could be withheld for 60 days?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I think there was a question, and I had the same question. Some of these positions we're bringing in at like a master's level, step 7, which is fairly well up the scale. Is that because we've only had one applicant for this, or do we get others, or how's that evaluation process?
That's a great question. Typically, when you have difficulty in certain certification areas, we find ourselves opening it up to potentially individuals with more experience. And although we're always weighing that process, we want to hire the best and the most qualified. We also understand the difficulty of our fiscal relationship and our responsibility as well as the district. So some of these positions, they might be a little bit higher, but it's because they're more difficult to fill typically.
Thank you.
Any other comments on these employment items? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Navarette.
I'll start down the other end because I can't unmute that fast.
Sorry, duly noted.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0. May I have a motion to approve the employment classified items as listed here this evening? Ms. Hull, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond, any comments? Mr. Earnshaw?
I guess I should ask my questions and I asked for it to be separate. Item 11, the network manager. I went back, and this is a replacement due to a retirement, is that correct?
To be quite honest, I may have to appeal to Dr. Zerbe.
It is, okay. So, and I went back and looked, do we know what the salary was of the former person who was in this position, or is in this position?
120, I'm sorry?
103, I believe.
103?
Okay.
103.
And then I believe the retirement, when I back and looked at prior meeting agenda, was effective October 3rd. Is this because we need an overlap from a training perspective, or has the retirement date changed?
Mr. Grady is currently using his vacation that he's accrued over the course of his tenure here. He is not effectively, here working for us at this time. So in that sense, the position is vacant, and we need that support.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions on these items? Seeing none, at Mr. Navarette's request, we'll start our roll call vote with Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Can I have a motion to approve I guess we have nothing for F and G, so change of status classified, uncompensated leave professional, uncompensated leave classified, and sabbatical leave as listed on the agenda this evening. Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond, any comments from the board?
I did have a question. Were we, under sabbatical leave, aren't we supposed to describe perhaps what the sabbatical leave was for? Or am I misunderstanding that? That we were supposed to have a description of what it was for, whether it was...
I may refer to Kyle on this one, but one thing that, under our sabbatical leave policy, we want to be careful of. Sometimes we have a medical sabbatical involved. We want to be very careful about what we disclose in that agenda item.
Can it say medical versus educational?
It could. That would be permissible.
Do you know what that might be? Or if we can just, even when we say, can we say medical or educational?
Medical.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay. Let's take a roll call vote then. Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0. May I have a motion to approve the supplemental contracts as listed here this evening? Ms. Cancro, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond? Questions? Comments?
My question on this one relates to item 8, the supplemental contracts for the department's subject area coordinators. Is these amounts and all these departmental coordinators spelled out in the MEA contract? So that's where this is
Yes.
from? Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, roll call vote?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Motion carries 9-0. And now we'll take a motion to approve the salary adjustment, classified substitute list, volunteers, and community education item as listed this evening. Mr. Winters, and a second. Ms. Reese, any comments from the board? Mr. Ryan?
Just wanted to make a quick comment on M, the salary adjustment for Mr. Bricker. I just want to say thank you very much for all the work that you've done, the great improvement that I've seen in that position so far, your handling of the transportation. I think this is well-deserved. So,
Thank you.
I would second that comment. Thank you, Mr. Bricker. Any other comments? Okay. Roll call with Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
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 Can you say that again, Ralph?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
You can
Motion
start with me,
carries
it's okay. I don't want to put Jen under pressure every vote.
9-0. Curriculum and programs, Dr. Katona?
I'll take that one. Please know that we're asking for the approval of the PIAA athletic schedule for the 2018-19 school year per policy number 123. Please note that as of yesterday evening, the attachment was updated. There was an error for boys basketball for a call that has been corrected. It previously said the high school gym, now it says the proper gym, which would be the Arcola gym. So that was the only error, and that was the update provided.
Okay, thank you for that. May I have a motion to approve the PIAA athletic schedule for the 2018-2019 school year per policy number 123? Mr. Earnshaw, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond, any comments from the board?
Dr. Zerbe, could you explain again about the boys' tennis for Arcola, why that is not included?
Tennis is not adopted by the Pioneer Athletic Conference. So it is an activity that occurs outside of the conference and outside of PIAA, and is a scheduled event that occurs among similar schools, but it's not adopted by the conference. And therefore, it's technically not a PIAA event, so it wouldn't show up on this report.
Any other comments? Okay, let's take a vote, starting with Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 9-0. Gifts and donations, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. There are 3 gifts to accept a gift of one Artley student model clarinet from Tracy Bugosh, a value of $30, to accept the donation from Summers Laboratories, a value of $100, and accept the donation from Pfizer for $984.49 with 2 checks. In addition to gifts and donations, there's a trip. Approve the participation of the Arcola Intermediate School in the Main Exchange Program for the 2018-19 school year. Cost to the district $34.83 for 4 substitutes for 5 days. We also, under number 14, have 3 appointments. We're recommending that the board appoint the EOE officer as per our policy, approve the appointment of Che Regina to serve as Equal Opportunities Officer, as well as to serve as the Title IX Coordinator for the district. And lastly, as Mr. Ryan previously brought to the public and board's attention, we're asking for you to approve Dr. Troy Sosnovic to serve as a school safety and security coordinator in accordance with Section 1309B of Act 44 of 2018.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Is there an objection to approving all of these together? Does anyone want to pull any of these out separately? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the gifts and donations, trips, and appointment of EOE officer, appointment of Title IX coordinator, and appointment of school safety and security coordinator as presented here this evening? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Navarette, comments from the board? Mr. Navarette.
Yeah, just one quick question for Kyle. Does the language of number E need to reflect Act 44 instead of SB 1142? Or is that immaterial to the appointment?
The language of the description does not need to be identical in terms of the title. The importance is the duties that are being carried out by the individual in that position.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Let's take a vote then to approve these 5 items. Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0. We have dates for board members' calendars, some meetings coming up in September. Is there any old business this evening?
This is an old business, but just to save me an email, since everybody is at the committee is here, I will not be at the September 5th Education Committee meeting, and Ms. Cancro will be taking my place.
Thank you for that update. Anything else for old business?
I also cannot make that Education Committee meeting.
Okay.
We'll address that.
Okay.
We may possibly need to reschedule that Education Committee meeting. It will be advertised as such if we do.
That meeting conflicts with the high school back-to-school night.
Okay.
Not my issue.
Okay. Anything else for old business? Okay, new business. Dr. Zerbe?
There are 2 items under new business. I'm going to just read again the one that I believe the board, that I said earlier that the board should take action on this evening, and that would be approve waiver agreements for student 230248 and student 1454141336, and the settlement agreement for student 53048048. I would recommend to the president if she could look for an action on that item, and then we'll go to the discussion item listed already on the agenda, if you don't mind.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the 3 student items that were presented by Dr. Zerbe? That would be 2 waiver agreements and 1 settlement agreement for the students stated. Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Winters, any comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll start with Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, the motion carries 9-0.
So then for the item listed on the agenda under new business, it says master plan discussion. This is placed here not necessarily for action, but for discussion. So it says the board will discuss the Arrowhead Elementary School property as it relates to the facilities master plan. So to set the stage for the discussion, I thought I'd provide some summary information and then allow the board to have that discussion. For the past several months, the property committee of the board has been working through the facilities master plan process to consider the summer 2019 projects. There have been numerous discussions at these meetings regarding the Arrowhead Elementary School and how and when its needs will be addressed in a more substantial manner. Questions regarding the master plan's identification of items to be addressed at Arrowhead were reviewed by the construction management firm Fidavia to determine if all items listed must be considered in the maintenance cost for this building. The construction management firm provided the property committee with a summary that excluded a number of the items that were from the original study, but included items later discovered by the construction management team that are needed. As such, the $14 million estimate on maintenance for Arrowhead is our current figure. In addition, the construction management team proposed that new construction of a similar sized building would be approximately $25 million. In addition to these conversations, the committee has discussed what a closure would entail. The board authorized an update to last year's enrollment study by Milone and McBroom, which is currently being vetted prior to presenting the enrollment figures and other educational, space, financial, and programmatic information to be considered by the board in its determination of a path forward for Arrowhead. I have provided each board member with a draft timeline, which I'll pass out now. There we go. Like that door. I've provided each board member with a draft timeline that I believe will allow for an appropriate process inclusive of public input to move us forward. Much of what I struggle with is the fact that we closed a building not more than 1 year ago where Arrowhead was also considered for closure at that time. And at that time, I recommended that we not close both buildings. So while I understand that there is a need to look at all options, I'm not certain what has changed between then and now. So I am asking for opinions and feedback from the board in this whole scenario of maintenance, building, potential closures this evening in order to better inform me on how I might lead this process going forward. And that ends my summary of the comment. And listed in a timeline we have, just for public knowledge, in August we're talking about communicating the proposed timeline, possibly having a presentation to the public and the board in sometime in October, giving a period of wait for receiving public comment, about 30 days or so, having more discussion in December, and coming up with a decision on the direction possibly in January of 2019, and then allowing for April, June, and July a process whereby if maintenance was to occur, we would continue with the master plan timeline process, but if some other decision were made, a different timeline would likely need to occur. So that should be a starting point for our discussion.
If I can just start maybe by asking for, some of this information was discussed in property. I've made some of the property meetings, but not all. I'm wondering, Ralph, if you could give a little bit more information regarding the $14 million number now for renovations, which differs from the what we've seen in the past. What was taken out, what was added back in, and then a little bit more discussion possibly around the $25 million price tag for the new building. I know that in the original AEM that number was significantly lower than that. I'm just wondering if you could explain some more information there. Thank you.
Yeah, on the $25 million, Dan Sakala of Fidavia offered to just have his folks draw up a ballpark estimate for us. We had talked about just potential options, so we had a ballpark number to work with, and he even gave us a sketch of how, a new building might fit on the existing property with the existing school. Again, it was rough. It wasn't anything that we would work off, but he did use a number. I forget what the number was per square foot, but they just used a per square foot estimate based on recent construction of a school of similar size to come up with the $25 million numbers. Brian, Andrea, Jen, if I'm saying something incorrect, please correct me. The $14 million, I don't know what the genesis of that was, other than the $12 million that was done, and I know Davia then looked at some additional work of what would be needed to be done now. That number came up to around $1 million, but I couldn't tell you, Mike, specific of the full 14. I do know. I will say that all of the discussions we've had around renovations and building repairs, and maybe renovations is even too strong of a word, was just to address the maintenance deficiencies in the building as it exists now. They wouldn't have any impact on any of the programmatic deficiencies, the way the rooms are set up. There wasn't. There were significant repairs, but I would stop short of calling them renovations.
Thank you, Rob.
So maybe I can help, just to maybe clarify what I'm looking for, and then maybe that'll help us out here. I think my timeline suggests that that I go out and provide information to the board in a number of areas, not just enrollment, but financially and what and even to Mr. Ryan's comment, more detailed about what it is that would be prescribed in maintenance. But so there's a lot of information around this, and what I want to do is, because there's a lot of information, and that's what we talked about in property, was there's so much stuff that we could talk about and share. We need to really be focused in what direction we're going in. Otherwise, we can drown in information and not get anywhere. And so my timeline is actually rather, I would say, aggressive in terms of depending on how much information you want to and what direction you want to go. It could just be challenging. So I did mention earlier that it was only a year ago that we talked about a school closure. We made a decision. I made a recommendation. We as a board right now need, in my opinion, need to kind of give me direction about are we going to still have that conversation? Because if it is, then we add it into the timeline, and that may need to adjust things. I may need to split it up in multiple nights to do presentations. That was some of the comments that I think we had at the property committee meeting, and it's just how much can we. How much do we want to have conversations with? I mean, there's certainly some educational matters that we need to address. There's some things on the horizon. I got to tell you, in my conversations with superintendents in the North Monco Vocational Technical School sending area, most of those folks are having conversations about full-day kindergarten. And only one, Wissahickon, already has full-day kindergarten. So I think that's an important piece of information to consider as we progress forward on that. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to get out in front and talk about, but I want to talk about the things that are important to you that you think we need to speak about, and I don't want to spend time on stuff that not going anywhere. So that's I want to streamline this so that we have the discussion that's appropriate, and that we engage our community in a way that we want to engage them, because this is whatever we do, whether we're spending $14 million, $7 million, we need to make sure that the public is in tune and well aware of what direction we want to go in.
And just to give a little feedback from property. At property, we did start to discuss it, but we figured we really needed the whole board because about the evenings. If the choice is renovate, rebuild, or close, that's a lot of information and my biggest thing was the close option, and a member of the public laughed and ridiculed me for this, that I felt I did not have enough information. And the reason for that is there would have to be so much done in other schools in order for that to happen at probably all the buildings, possibly. And so that chunk of time could take a long time. I mean, I don't need every nitty-gritty. And then we were saying, well, did we have enough time for public comment that evening? Or do you put that over to the next night? And then some people were saying, well, do you need to give them the enrollment information that evening? Because that's another piece of it. And that's where this came from. But maybe I misunderstood Dr. Zerbe. I got the impression from your summary that you felt the best was really renovate or rebuild. That close isn't really an option. But maybe I misunderstood your summary.
So I think that's actually the direction that Dr. Zerbe is looking for this evening, because from what I understand from my individual conversations with Dr. Zerbe, so in, I guess it was February of 2017, we voted as the then constituted board to close Audubon, but we also voted to not close Arrowhead. And my personal feeling on that is that we have not gained any new information in the meantime. The only possible new information that we have is this updated enrollment data from Milo and McBroom that we're still working through and vetting. And just a preliminary look at that data shows that there is a possibility that our enrollment is trending upwards. So given the lack of new information, it seems premature to have another conversation about whether or not to close the building. Separately, having just gone through a building closure, I don't know that the community should be subjected to another building closure and reorganization. And to your point, if we were to go down to 3 elementary schools, and the amount of work that would need to be put in, not just to the infrastructure of the other buildings to accommodate those students, but programmatically, I mean, it would be an upheaval that could take several years as well. So I think that the direction that Dr. Zerbe is looking for is whether or not closure should even be on the table for discussion, or if we should just move forward and explore our options for renovating or replacing the building. Does that help?
Yes.
If I could just add to that, I mean, I think, should this just be broken down into like a decision tree where the first decision is to close or not to close? And focus on that? Should that remain on the list of possibilities? And then, because if you decide not to close, then you're into maintain or replace.
So I think that's the feedback that we're looking to get here, is whether or not we should even have a conversation on closure.
Well, I think we don't have any facts on that. And I think the facts need to be gathered. I mean, we don't know, I don't know, like if you look at every building we have, classroom utilization. I mean, how is every classroom in every building being utilized today? I don't have that information. I don't know if anybody else does. And 2 years ago, it was on the table to close 2. So I don't know what's changed. So step one is to, I think, get this enrollment study done. And, we've heard, that was supposed to be done end of July, and I'm not sure what happened there, just timing-wise, and then we heard last week, and I've got an email this afternoon about there's some flaws in the study from comments from last meeting and an email from a member of the public. So that needs to get investigated, and that report needs to get finalized. So, I think that's step one. And then we got to take a look at, everything that was done for the Audubon process. I just don't think we can take anecdotal information on, I agree it's a massive impact on the community should that decision be made, but, I think from a overall, not just fiscal standpoint, from a planning standpoint, we got to take a look at what buildings we have and how they're being used and how can they be used in the future. So I don't know that we can sit here today and just I wouldn't want to take that off the table.
So I do think we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Zerbe, we do have that information from the original, the original meeting that we had when we voted on what school to close. we have a lot of the information that Mr. Earnshaw is referring to, and it was my understanding that that was going to be disseminated to the board.
All that information is actually up online in a specific section of the website, and we can direct you to that or pull all that down and provide that to you. But yes, anything related to closing one building or closing two buildings, and any of the other options that were presented at that time are live on the district website.
No, but I'm saying give me something like in Eagleville, classroom 123 is used for a second grade the entire day, and there are 23 students in that classroom. I mean, the capacity study just gave like averages. I'm looking for, we've got a classroom that's used for, a full grade the entire day, or is it a full classroom used for special ed needs for an hour? And that's kind of stuff I think we need to get an understanding of.
And maybe a few years ago I wasn't aware of some things, but a few years ago I really didn't feel, and this is of no disrespect, maybe I'm looking for something different like Brian's talking about, I did not have what it would look like. People say there's room, and again, anecdotally I don't see it. I saw elementaries already full last year being there, but I could be wrong, like Brian's saying. I don't see what it looks like. I hear people say there's room at Skyview and Arcola, but I don't know that. And no disrespect to administrators, I heard 2-3 years ago, administrators said it can happen. Well, they also said we could cut a 5th and 6th grade teacher. I think class sizes are pretty darn at where I want them to be right now. So, teachers tell parents, sure, I can teach, and principals tell, and of course we can, but we don't always, say, well, if I had 5, you know what I'm saying? I don't have that information. I don't feel, even if I went on the website. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, just for clarification, we provided, for every scenario, we provided how that scenario would work. So every scenario actually worked. But there were trade-offs, and there were positive aspects of every scenario, and there were drawbacks to every scenario. And I believe in the, I can't remember which presentation it was, but certainly in at least one of them, there's a list of all of the options and all of the pros and cons associated with all of those options, including a one school building closure, meaning Arrowhead or Audubon, and a 2-building closure, meaning both of them together. So when we were considering all those options, they were real, and they all could have been completed. The challenge is to, again, I'll leave it at that. I think you as individual board members and the constituents that you serve, have to have some opinions about what kind of district we want to have and where we want to be with this in the futures. But this is your discussion, not mine at this point.
My only comment, just to go off what Brian's saying, although I do know what I would like to envision, I think it's important that we do look at that information as a new group of board members and look at this building is utilized 95%. It could be utilized 5% more, or like you had said, bring back that presentation of the work that you did do, saying all rooms could be utilized with these 3 buildings available. I just think we need to look at it all, go through it together, and then go to the next step. If that's ruled out, then we go to the renovation or rebuild. Just to have that.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in the middle here a little bit, and I am not hemming and hawing here, but I think I have some biases in my head already related to some things that I find really hard, that I would really have a hard time swallowing. However, I'll mention some of those, but I am trying to have the open mind of maybe these are the best. I'm trying to view this from an educational aspect first. and then determine in what is considered the recommendation from the educational aspect or educational choices that we have, then determine what financially that, can we afford it or not afford it? If this is the preferred and we can afford it, good. Most likely that's probably, the preferred is not going to be something we could afford. But the reality is I'd rather take it from that educational aspect with the recommendation of the administration of certain things. I know that we talked about from going from 4 to 3. There's been a recommendation about using Skyview. There's been a recommendation of going to K to 3 in the remaining 4 schools. At one point, there was some discussion a couple years ago that might be a better elementary education model. I don't know, right? I have trouble swallowing 8th grade in this building. I will have to be convinced that you're starting at me at a level of 0 with the acceptance of that as a possibility, to be honest. We have administration building that's a little raggedy. There's capacity that could be used there. So I think we should go through, that's what I say in the middle. I think the initial stage of where we're coming from should go through the process, but I also realize that, if there's really not a support for closing the school for whatever reason. For example, one of the reasons I have trouble swallowing, a bias maybe, is a physical school in the western part of Lower Providence. It's extremely important to have a community school in the western part of Lower Providence for property values and community. Taking out the Arrowhead School as a possibility moves that community school sort of outside the local border of Evansburg, in my opinion. Biased or not biased. But these are things I already have, and I'd rather have those facts come back to me and have those discussions around those educational aspects. And the capacity issues, those are facts. But I'd rather see a direction educationally, and then we can start talking about if it can be done. Because honestly, the pre-K or a full-day kindergarten or whatever other aspects that we envision, from what I can see in the current configuration, would be very difficult. So maybe the recommendation going through this process for the long-term 5-year, whatever the time period that we're looking at here, 5-10, is the valuation of a K-3 school in the existing 4 schools. But what does that mean? That means 4-5 and whatever. And maybe it requires 8th grade to go up to the high school, up to this building. How about that? So I think it would be best for us to go through that process as thoroughly we have to, do a touch point, and then evaluate and communicate that to the community of what our choices are. I think we can have these type of discussions open with the community and what we're looking at, so that it's not considered that, okay, they're looking to close it, or they decided to close it and behind closed doors, and the whole debacle that was a couple years ago. So I welcome the discussion, but I welcome it around first an educational aspect.
And I think that would be part of, if you look at that decision tree, whether to close or not. You'd look at fiscal, community impact, if you decide where the kid's going to be housed. You look at all that stuff, the educational impact, et cetera. But I'm just trying to think if we put a lot of stuff on the table and there's a lot of discussion and nothing will ever get done. We'll be sitting here 2 years from now with at the same place. That's what I'm thinking. Is there a way that the discussion could be focused so that Dr. Zerby's only evaluating kind of 1, maybe 2 things, or maybe 1 preferably, so that all that data can be gathered and we make that decision. That's kind of the prime decision that drives the next steps.
So you're saying that you see closure or not closure as being the first step in the decision tree. So once we have to go through that step.
Yeah, and you bring everything else in. Is there a desire for full-day kindergarten? Is there a desire to have a school in the western part of the district? Can you do it with, 3 elementary schools, Skyview or Arcola? I agree with Paul. I agree 8th grade should not come to this building. I wouldn't support that either. But so you're really looking at everything but the high school as far as making this first evaluation.
Madam President, if I could just add one factor, I think, for everyone to be aware of, which is there's a difference between considering closing a school and voting to close a school. And the reason I point that out is one of the issues, and you could say this was a misunderstanding, or how you characterize it is up to the individual, but several years ago, when you went through the process, there was an initial hearing scheduled. And that hearing was, the announcements from the district was that it was a hearing to consider whether to close a school. And part of the reason for that is under the school code, if you are closing a school, you have to have a hearing, and then you have to have a period of cooling off before you actually make your decision of whether to close a school. So that adds a little bit to your time frame dynamic. So the reason for pointing that out is certainly you could have a discussion, you could have a vote on whether to consider closing a school and make that determination. But if you are interested in essentially having a final vote on closing or not, there are certain time issues that would come into play, and we can certainly talk about what that time frame is, but there would need to be a formal hearing scheduled and then a cooling off period before a decision is made if it would be to close a school.
So we would have to restart the whole process that was started back in 2015.
So the question is, could you utilize the information, the hearings that were held at that time? To be honest, I'm not aware of any case law that has looked at that particular issue of how long of a period of time could you have. I would be concerned about making a decision without having a hearing at this particular point.
If we ever got there, I would not support those hearings being our hearings.
Paul, can you say that? I'm sorry, Paul, can you say that again? I didn't hear what you said.
I'm just saying the hearings from 2 years ago, I think we would have to go through the exact same process again, as if we were starting fresh.
Got it, thank you. Sorry, Andrea.
I was going to say we're still not anywhere. Good discussion. I don't mean that. I just mean.
So it sounds like what we could then do, based on what Mr. Summers has said and what Mr. Earnshaw is asking for, is we could put an item on a future agenda that is a vote to consider whether or not to vote on closing the school. Is that essentially?
I think that's fair. I think that it would be a question of whether you would proceed with the scheduling of a hearing to explore closing a school.
And at that point, give some information, like meaning we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of renovating or building, just numbers, but give the information of what a school closure would look like,
That's my understanding of it, is that it would just be a meeting, or the only agenda item would be around that particular component.
So that takes away the problem of presenting so much information in 1 or 2 evenings.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised at some of the discussion here because, I sat through those hearings and watched them and rewatched them and listened to the data, reviewed the data, sifted through the data. And as Kim said before, the only meaningful piece of information that may have changed is this enrollment study. And we know from the enrollment study that there was a dip and then an increase in the enrollment. And the preliminary data that we got back suggested that that was going to occur sooner than later because they were now considering the new developments in Worcester and Lower Providence. So if anything, our situation sees us with increased enrollment, not decreased enrollment. So I guess I'll be very plain. Dr. Zerbe, I have no tolerance for another discussion about closing Arrowhead. The question was asked and answered by a previous board. I don't think it's worth reopening without any kind of additional or significantly different information than what we had before. If we want to recap the data for the purposes of being complete in discussions, I'm okay with that. But let's focus on the fact that we need to fix a broken school. We need to either renovate the school, we need to replace the school a la Eagleville. And as Paul said, one of the things that, when I ran for this board, one of the big discussion points was the fact that Audubon had just been closed. And every door that I knocked on and every person I talked to, I told that I could not support closing Arrowhead because it would vacate the west side of Lower Providence. And nothing has changed in that regard. Our elementary schools are not underperforming. Baker close on a whim because we're not making enough money there. These are the pillars of our community. They're foundations of our community. We have kids that are Arrowhead kids and Eagleville kids. We still have kids that are Audubon kids. And that's how people relate to the schools that they grew up in. There is no data to take this back to science and math. There is no data right now that has changed from the previous discussion. I don't think it's worth discussing at all.
I feel like I'm going to take us backwards a step, because I thought in property committee what we were discussing was the option of having an open house where we would include financial impact. We would have Fidavia speak to the physical concerns of the building. We would have Mylona McBroom present future enrollment projections. And whether that was one night or 2 nights, I wanted the information to get out to the public. And I'm concerned that we're talking about having a discussion on whether or not to close a school, which is going to cause a community concern just with that wording. So I would still like to go back to having a full presentation on what the options are, rather than trying to do it step by step.
I think part of the concern with having the presentation is the logistics of it. So it's a lot of information to sift through, even if we were just talking about one option of a potential school closure. So you're presenting a great deal of information. You want public input on that information. If you spread it over 2 nights, and you have people that can only attend one night, but they can't attend the second night, so you have to have public comment both nights, because we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to have their voice heard. And it's a lot of information to present all at once. So I think part of our conversation here is whether or not that's the direction, if that's the process we want to follow. Do we want to put ourselves in a potential information overload? I think that there are benefits to doing it your way, but I think the volume of information is the part that I think, we can only sit in these chairs for so long before you start to lose sight of what we're all doing here. I think that's my concern. And I appreciate, Mr. Navarrete, your frankness, and I agree with you that this is a decision that was placed before the board. It was voted down, and we do not have new information to consider at this time. And so I'm in agreement with you completely that this is not, I don't believe it's a direction that we need to go in.
Sorry, I was holding off to give Ms. Drummond a chance to talk if she wanted to. I intentionally didn't want to get involved in the beginning part of this conversation, because I feel it's important that, the 5 board members who weren't part of this process the last time had a chance to speak. From my own standpoint, frankly, Ralph, I agree with most of what you said. I did go through this process. We were presented with the options. There was no way we were closing 2 schools at the time. I have not seen any information since then that would prove that we could do it. And even if we could do it, the educational aspects, as Paul had mentioned, I can't even imagine what they would look like. I mean, we had a tough time trying to figure out if we could squeeze one more classroom somewhere into Arrowhead. And we're talking about taking another elementary school off the table here. So I concur. I would not consider closing Arrowhead Elementary. That being said, again, I'm 1 board member. There are 5 board members. If the 5 new board members want to go through this process, I think it's very important that, be on the record and know what Pandora's box you're opening up. Because I think that, if we want to talk, I think Mary said it best. I mean, people are going to hear school closure, and that's probably all they're going to hear for the most part. So you have to have the stomach to go through the entire process of what we did 2 years ago. And I am 100% there with you if you believe that you need to do that to feel comfortable, what the prior board saw and voted on was not enough for you. I support that decision, but I really urge you to consider that decision strongly now before we go and have any type of meeting that's labeled as to close or not to close a school or some type of decision tree where that's going to be the first thing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I am going to go now. I would like to see current information based on this year's enrollment of classroom utilization in the elementary schools, because I know what we had was what the theoretical utilization was going to be after the school closure, and I would like to see updated numbers with that. But I also feel like Ralph and Mike do that, and particularly when you look at the development that's going on that side of Lower Providence, that it is really critical to have a physical school in that section of Lower Providence Township. So I feel more like Ralph and Mike do on this matter.
To fall on Liz, I think having those utilization beyond the elementary, though, is because I think part of the distrust, I know that when I was up there, the capacity thing just drove me insane, not really having a good capacity evaluation. And I think, mathematically, but those that touch the buildings, certainly the elementary schools right now, and I have been in, they are not, there's no mothballs and tumbleweeds going down the hallways in any of our elementary schools. Honestly, I don't really see it at the Arcola and Skyview either, but there may be some capacity in those. And there's obviously a little bit of capacity probably here at the high school as those 400 classes of 420 and so forth are graduating out. So there's probably some room here. But I think having that and truly putting it in a way that people can understand and not just on theoretics about we have room for 6,000 students. It's such a disservice to the community about what we really have, and I think it just adds to the distrust in the process. And that's not a reflection of Dr. Zerbe. I'm just saying, when we have those round numbers, people don't really know truly what our capacity is or not. So I think, to Liz's point, I think it needs to go beyond the elementary, so we really understand what assets we have in the school district to service our students.
And to your prior point about using the educational model as a priority for this discussion, I think that there was a lot of talk when we were looking at closing Audubon. Okay, what does gym look like? What does lunch look like? What does the day of that student look like who's going now when we're consolidating these schools? And I think I would, in addition to the physical building impacts, I would also like to see something about the educational impacts and the scheduling impacts and how it would really impact the quality of, or could impact the quality of the education.
You don't support 9:45 lunches? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to say, though. I think if we showed the utilization, it shows that it be nearly impossible to close a school because we are focusing on education, the special education program, the therapies that are taking place, the learning support, the gifted, all the programming that we want to do. If we show the utilization of those buildings, it will show that we're at max capacity, that we're not going to be able to close it, in my opinion, because I do see our schools being utilized, especially with the mental health programming that we want to put in, possibly full-day kindergarten, looking at it that way, and if that's how I'm looking at it, and then saying, what are the renovations and the new building, and doing those comparisons. So.
One thing I'll note is on Dr. Zerbe's timeline, I liked that it mentioned bringing this up to the public soon, because before the rumors start and all of that. I mean, I wonder if it can be, I understand Mary's point, and Mary, that we talked at the property about doing a whole big thing, and I do understand that. But if you hear what the board's already said, and like we've all said, the information from over 2 years ago, maybe it can be the community, the school district has a big decision, and that decision has always been close, renovate, or rebuild. We know that closure is not an option, but we're not positive, so we're going to discuss that at a board meeting, and then based on that decision, then have a bigger presentation on renovating or rebuilding. I mean, something like that. I mean, because we have to respect the I hate saying trust the process or respect the process due to, the sports thing, but anyway, but I don't know if that would kind of answer some of these questions as well, and not waste time. And I don't want to, I know we're not talking about just time sensitivity, but depending on what we choose to do, there are decisions that have to be made facilities-wise, and that's why this started at property. So we do need to make a decision, because we have kind of put it on hold for a year. So I don't know if that helps you, Brian, or if that's the right way to do it, but that's the upfront, most transparent thing. We have these 3 decisions. We really don't think closure is even an option, but we're just going to lay out a few things on the table at a board meeting, let that even know if it's going to go further. Depending on that meeting, if it's not going further, then we move to what we have to do about the facility. Is that?
Yeah, I just don't know that, like, I was just thinking about that, how would I know whether or not closure is an option without updated facts? So I understand there was a lot of data and discussion 2 years ago, but we commissioned a new enrollment study. Why do we do that? We want to see what it looks like now. We know we've got to evaluate that report. Let's get that done. The first thing, get that done, evaluate these flaws that have been brought up, and something as simple as, and just hypothetically, if you show me a report that says every elementary school classroom, every Skyview classroom, every Arcola classroom is utilized for the full 7.5 hours of a school day, or whatever the time is, fully utilized, full classrooms, it's a moot point. You could, where are you going to put the kids if you take away one building? And I think it's that kind of facts that we need. I mean, I could be off base here. I didn't go through the process 2 years ago, but just let's get the facts together and make the decision, make an informed decision.
To that end, I mean, this is something that was part of the conversation when we did this 2 years ago. When you start talking about, whether or not classrooms are being used for the full day in each building, I mean, you start making this into a purely numbers exercise, and it doesn't work because kids aren't numbers. And so we can't say, okay, well, there's 1 extra classroom in this building and there's 2 extra classrooms in that building. So are we going to take 4th grade and split it up, between Skyview and Arcola? Or, we can't look at it that way. It's not a numbers endeavor.
Again, that was a hypothetical example I was giving you. So I'm saying, tell me what the utilization is. If there's a need for a special ed programming in classrooms, fine, that's great. We need that, then we need that space. Just trying to get understanding of what the space is used for. If you come back and say, well, there's 4 class periods during the day that the room sits vacant, and there's 5 of those rooms in one building where that's the case, then we got to look at shifting around, again, hypothetically. But that's the kind of data I'm looking for.
I believe that was part of what was presented to us 2 years ago, but I would have to go back and refresh my memory to be sure.
Okay, I don't remember, the board may have seen it, but I don't recall ever seeing something that said classroom 1, 2, 3 had grade 4 in it for the entire day, well, except for the teacher's planning period or recess or lunch, like that.
Your actual statement, even though it's It's an example. Your actual statement is correct. We didn't say that for that level of student because the only time that the students wouldn't be in there is when they're at specials, and it would be a short period of time where we wouldn't be able to schedule. So elementary is one thing, but scheduling in the high school in Arcola is a different process, which would lend more to your example, I think. And we did talk about that in the process, but I don't want to get into explaining all that. I mean, I've taken a lot of notes here. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the members of the board this evening. I think what I'd like to do is, if it's at all possible, let me rethink this. Let me bounce some of this information off my cabinet, and let me come back with another updated proposal for the board to consider. Would that be appropriate? And I'm going to also include Kyle in the process because while I know that we need, and I was in favor if we had to talk about a closure, I was in favor of making sure that the hearing would occur. But considering, when you're talking about the decision tree is an interesting concept that will complicate things and maybe. So I'll need to pull him in on the conversation as well. But I'd like to be able to come back to the board with another recommendation.
And that's fine. And I'll just add that I'm not advocating for one decision over another here. I'm just saying,
no. But
let's
I'm
get
talking
the
about the
facts
decision, like the
and try to get the focus so we're not chasing down 10 different options here and try to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're absolutely clear. I mean, that was a good suggestion. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, is like, how do I get there without dumping like a million pieces of facts on you and the public on one night and then expecting the public to come up to a podium and respond to all that? I mean, that's what I want to avoid. Let me consider everything that was shared this evening, and I'll get back to you hopefully within in a week or so with another recommendation. Thank you so much for your input.
Before we move on, let me make one more comment. If I'm correct, the only decision that we have in front of us is whether or not to include closing Arrowhead as part of this discussion, right? We're still going to talk about whether or not we need to build a new school. We're still going to talk about whether or not we should renovate the school or what the extent of those renovations is. So let me ask you a question, Kyle, from a procedural standpoint, and I'm glad you're sitting up here tonight. Is it possible tonight that if somebody were to make a motion to exclude closing Arrowhead from the discussions, that we could do that and just give the superintendent some very clear direction as to how to move this discussion forward? Because let's put everybody in record. Because I'll be honest, I don't think there's the votes on this board to tolerate even a discussion about closing Arrowhead because there is no new information. I hope our frustration is coming through loud and clear.
My concern is that there is a clear procedure in the law for closing a school. And casting a vote obviously presents options. And an option is to close a school. You may, or other board members may be in favor of not closing a school. So my concern is that obviously if the outcome of a vote is to close a school and we have not gone through a hearing procedure first, that has some concerns associated with it. Could you make a determination, could the board conduct a vote on whether to consider closing a school? So could you have a motion and a second and a vote on whether to engage in a discussion of whether to close a school? You could, and there could be an outcome of that vote. Obviously, it's something that could be revisited at any point in time. The board could always explore that option again. So I guess to your immediate point, my concern with, for instance, a vote on tonight whether to close a school has significant procedural concerns with it. But if your suggestion is could you conduct a vote on whether to even consider closing a school, to whether to go down the process of exploring it, it's an item that certainly you could vote on. It's a little bit unique in terms of voting to not do anything, which is not a typical action that comes before the board. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else under new business? Okay, with that, I'll open it up to courtesy of the floor. Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I applaud the idea of expeditious, full discussion of the Arrowhead mess. It's a mess in part because prior boards have not, for whatever reason, have not kept up the maintenance of that building. I put out an enrollment projection earlier this month that, and then this week I reviewed a draft of the Malone and McBroom enrollment report, and I understand a flaw in it and have penciled out some revisions to the K-4 or K-5 enrollment levels out through the year 2027, 2028. That's 9 years from now. And I've looked at the capacity numbers from the studies of a couple of years ago. And at this point, clearly, if you were to close Arrowhead, the remaining 3 elementary schools would not support K-4. They could support K-3, and then you'd have to do something about 4th grade and Skyview and Arcola and the grade structure. And I continue to be logical in my thinking of the multiple issues. And several board members expressed the thought of, let's look at education first. I think in general, the fewer building transfers that occur in K-12, the better the outcomes. Translating that, having a K-5 structure is educationally better than having a K-3 structure and then going to another building for a few years and then going to another building for a few years, et cetera, et cetera. There's got to be some educational facts associated with that rather than just emotion. I've advocated for a K-5 structure with Eagleville, Woodland, and Worcester, and Skyview. And Skyview isn't exactly in Collegeville, but zip code-wise, it's either there or pretty close to there. And the enrollment projections out through the 27-28 school year allow for a K-5 structure. And maybe by the year 2025, relooking at things involving economics, demographics, et cetera, full-day kindergarten. There could be thought given to a 2 or 3 year building period for a replacement school on the Arrowhead property after the current rundown building is demolished. So that has some financial aspects to it. Potentially there's 8 years without the administrative overhead of having a separate set of janitors and cafeteria people and office people, $1 million a year savings.
Mr. Andrews, can you please wrap up?
Yes, so, and I certainly support Mr. Earnshaw's thoughts about what is the utilization of the facilities. And I think that I think there's a lot of new discussion that's warranted rather than just saying, well, we all made up our minds 2 years ago. The board has changed. The financial difficulties go on, and the public deserves respect.
Mr. Andrews.
And I certainly think that there are costs to not having an Arrowhead, but they're
Mr.
emotional,
Andrews.
and we also have educational concerns and financial concerns. Thank you.
Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. Where's Mr. Navarrette's meeting minutes? Didn't see him on the agenda, didn't see him anywhere. You know where they are? I don't see him on a website. You know where they are?
They are on the website.
Okay, I'll have to find them. I've heard people tonight talking about, concerns about not closing a school because there'd be a vote based on hearing school closure. That's not a reason to not vote for closing a school. You guys are going to have to listen to people, coming to the meeting, be afraid to hear them, complaining about school closure. That's all they're going to hear. It's ridiculous. $25 million, based on a feeling, based on feelings. Ridiculous. As far as Mr. Navarrette goes, that's probably the most irresponsible thing I think I've ever seen or heard anybody do. Take a vote before all the facts are in, before any discussion occurs, to not go ahead with considering closure, blowing your fiduciary responsibility as a board member. You should resign, Ralph. You should resign. Ridiculous.
Dr. Malik, you direct your comments to
Totally biased. I mean, thank God for Mr. Earnshaw. You were ready to pull the trigger on getting rid of that option. I mean, you guys are biased. It's scary to watch back there. But what I did is, all this problem you're dealing with right now is iatrogenic, meaning you caused it. Because when you pulled the trigger on closing Audubon, you went to scenario 3 from scenario 8. You see, I gave it to you. Scenario 3 is close Audubon half-day kindergarten. And if you look, it said the current enrollments would result in 90 to 94% of target. And at the high scenario, you'd be at 101. So when you closed the one school, you packed all the kids into all the other elementary schools, causing your own problem. Now, I don't know whether it was intentional, because now we're hearing for the first time everything's packed. You caused your own problem. Because you were supposed to vote on option 8, which was 2 closures and realignment, which would have taken care of your problem. But you converted it to option 3, which caused the problem. So now you can conveniently say, your place is packed, and make your case for building a new school, new $25 million school. It's not funny. It's no joke. You're sitting there with a big smirk on your face. It's not funny.
Dr. Malik, please don't direct your comments at the other board members.
It's not funny. It's not a joke. You caused your own problem. You filled up the schools. They're packed because of you. And now you're going to use that as an excuse to build a $25 million school. Because you don't want to consider what you should have done way back when. The new study's flawed because it appears the birth data wasn't updated. They're using 2016 birth data. They didn't use the 2017 data, and the housing data conflicts with the housing data from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Did you know that? I went through it all. So it all shows a picture of increased enrollment that Mr. Navarrete loves. Okay? So what's going to happen is the enrollment's going to go down and it's going to go back up. But it's going to go back up to where it was in 2017. So it's going to be the same as it was when you guys had to make a decision. It's not going to be higher.
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
Sure, I will. It's going to be exactly where it was when you had to make a decision to consider option 8. It's not going to be higher. So you're going to be back in the same boat when you should have pulled the trigger for option 8. So don't sit there and say it's higher and we're going to have you can just close the school like option 8 and do your reconfiguration. So it's all a sham. This is like Skyview 2 all over again.
Mr. Bickelman.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I think the first thing you have to do is put 6th grade back in Arcola. Okay? You have 7th and 8th grade there at much lower enrollments than what they were when they were 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in there. You have low enrollments coming through from K through 6 that are going to move through Arcola. And the first thing you need to do is put that scenario together. Move 6th grade back to Arcola, make the 4-5 building Skyview, and K through 3 at the remaining 3 schools, and save yourself $25 million to build a new one, $12 million to renovate, to put new ceiling tiles in, and $1 million in operating costs you're going to save per year in the general fund budget. Get 6th grade over where it belongs. Have those 6th graders look at what they're going to see the following year in 7th and 8th grade with changing classes and things like that. And get 4th and 5th grade in Skyview. $1 million, build yourself a heck of a playground, get 5th grade back out at recess. Okay? That's what you need to do. You need to have a scenario brought up that way. Okay? I can just run through some schools that we closed at Colonial, Spring Mill Elementary, Lafayette Consolidated, Plymouth Consolidated, and Black Rock School we closed. Those boards had the stomach to do all that. Okay? We went from 9,200 down to 3,300 kids. But that's what you need to do. Put 6th grade back where it belongs and free up the space, make K through 3 at the remaining 3 schools. Save a lot of money. Don't put another load of debt on the taxpayers' backs. The other thing I want to talk to is we hired, Mr. Earnshaw questioned, why are we hiring teachers at step 7? And Mr. Regina said it's hard to find specialists, so we slot them in at the 7th level. You know, the specialists, other people are easier to find. Well, tonight you hired a chemistry teacher, master's step 2. Chemistry teacher at the high school, master's step 2. And then on the other page, we hired a 4th grade teacher at master's step 7.5. 4th grade teacher, 7.5 at the salary schedule. Chemistry teacher, where we had 3 chemistry teachers last year. We had parents complaining about 3 chemistry teachers. We got a master's step 2 chemistry at the high school, step 7.5 for a 4th grade teacher. And you might notice this. These professionals are in alphabetical order, right? Alphabetical order, except you have to flip the page. This person's out of alphabetical order, the one that's at 7.5, at step 7.5. Then you can't see them all in one place. You can't see step 2 and step 7 on one sheet. You have to flip over the one that's out of alphabetical order, the only one that's out of alphabetical order, on the other side. It was weird. Maybe it was just a mistake. But I think it's on the other side because you can't see step 2 and step 7 on one sheet here. But I think it's easier to find a 4th grade teacher than it is to find a chemistry teacher. So we have a 4th grade teacher at 7.5, a chemistry teacher at the level 2, which is ridiculous. Could have saved some money there. I had a right to know request. We hired 2 teachers for compensated leaves in the last 2 or 3 months. Compensated leaves. I had a right to know request. I got their letters. Both teachers are requesting a sabbatical leave. Both teachers are requesting a sabbatical leave. We granted compensated leaves, which is provided in the MEA contract. Both teachers requested sabbatical leaves. What happens between the request for sabbatical leave and getting a compensated leave? What happened? The teachers requested sabbatical leaves in their first paragraph in their request. They got compensated leaves in the MEA contract, provided for in the MEA contract. Sabbatical leaves are provided for in the school code. So what happened? What was the discussion there? Why did they get compensated leaves and not sabbatical leaves? It's weird. Maybe they're saving sabbatical leaves. I don't know, savies or something for another year. But I looked at their requirements and things like that, and they look like they're taking some, coursework to benefit the district, but they requested sabbatical leaves and they got compensated leaves.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman. Okay, seeing no other members of the public, I think we're good for courtesy of the floor. May I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Drummond, a second. Mr. Ryan, meeting adjourned.